Selena, let's start with you. We'll get to the student loan debt in just a second, but this is the first time we have heard the president in depth talk about the fact that the House Speaker got the boot, and is he concerned about his agenda now and if anything can happen with the House being stalled, and also who does he see as becoming the new Speaker?
Yeah, exactly, Kira. I've been in a lot of rooms like that, and that's exactly right. He fielded so many questions about Ukraine and the fact that is his foreign policy agenda in peril now that we don't know who the next speaker is going to be. And he did talk about how the dysfunction always concerns him and that there are some extreme MAGA Republicans, he says, who want to undo everything that he's done. But he says that's only a small minority, and he believes that the majority of Congress still supports his policies, including more aid to Ukraine. But again, he faced a lot of pushback on that. How can he reassure allies? How can he be sure, given we don't know who the next speaker is going to be? And he repeated there that he's going to soon make more remarks, in fact, to say that it is in the overwhelming interest of the United States to continue to support Ukraine to ensure that Ukraine succeeds. This is a key priority for him. He also said that he hopes the government does not lurch towards the brink of another government shutdown, and it shouldn't be left to the last moment. He also called this poisonous atmosphere in Washington, D.C. in politics today. He said before that he's been around for a long time, and this is a president who spent a long time in Congress himself. He prides himself on being able to reach across the aisle, and he said before that he's never seen a Congress act quite like this. When it comes to legislative priorities, well, in a divided Congress like this, there's no hope really that any of his major legislative priorities, big picture ones, whether it's around immigration or gun violence, are going to get through. However, they're going to focus on implementing what's already been passed and trying to take executive action wherever they can, including here on student loans, which we'll hear more about. And this is really an example of the White House trying to show this split screen: chaos, dysfunction on the Hill, while the president here, business as usual, governing, legislating.
Let's bring in our Elizabeth Schulze and also Jay O'Brien, both of whom cover the White House and the Hill for us as well. I'll have you both sort of weigh in here on what we heard from the president there regarding McCarthy. Elizabeth, I was a little surprised. I thought that one of the reporters in the room would have asked the president about these allegations that Matt Gaetz made, which led to this coup to take down House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and that is, was any type of secret deal made with regard to Ukraine funding over the last weekend to help avert a government shutdown? I don't know. I didn't hear that come up particularly in the room, that question in particular. But what are your thoughts about the questions that were asked and what the president did reveal? Elizabeth, we'll start with you, and then Jay, I'd love for you to weigh in.
Well, and Kara, frankly, President Biden did double down on this idea that he had made two deals with Speaker McCarthy. One was made after the debt ceiling debacle, where the two came together after these months of back and forth. They had a handshake agreement. They passed this agreement to avert a debt default. And then they came up with this bipartisan plan for the budget. And of course, that was one of the initial disagreements over on the Hill with people like Representative Gaetz and other congressmen who said, we don't like that deal. And that got them going when it came to the shutdown. But President Biden also said there was a second deal that he made with Speaker McCarthy. And it was notable that he went out of his way to say that he is grateful that all sides came together, including Speaker McCarthy, to come and do the right thing, whether it was avoiding a debt default or a government shutdown. He said at the end of the day, Speaker McCarthy did the right thing, and it is his hope that that's something that the next speaker might be able to do. But of course, not throwing his weight behind any person at this point on who that might be, and acknowledging the fact that there is this poisonous atmosphere, in his own words, that is going to make getting anything done a lot more difficult in the ways that he would hope when it comes to reaching across the aisle, Kira.
So, Jay, did the president just debunk then basically what Matt Gaetz said? As Elizabeth points out, he was very transparent about the conversations that he had with McCarthy about Ukraine funding. It doesn't sound like it was very secret.
Yeah, a couple of things to walk through. First and foremost, Speaker McCarthy denied that there was any kind of secret deal. And last night, when he gave that press conference, when he said he wouldn't seek the speakership again, he said that the quote-unquote deal that we're talking about was an agreement with the president that in this 45-day period where the government is temporarily funded, if they had to move money around to Ukraine, that was allowed for in the provision of the temporary funding measure. So that was McCarthy's explanation. Nonetheless, while Gaetz made a point of saying that that deal was one of the grievances he had with Speaker McCarthy, as Elizabeth noted, if it wasn't that, it was going to be something else. Matt Gaetz had been talking about coming for Kevin McCarthy for weeks and months. He had even talked about it in January during the speaker fight. So that's one element of things. The other element in what we hear from the president is, don't forget, this is the leader of the Democratic Party talking about, as Selena mentioned, drama amongst House Republicans, but also drama that Democrats yesterday said they didn't want any part of. And a lot of that had to do with President Biden's relationship with Speaker McCarthy. I've been talking to Democrats, and many tell me that one of the reasons they didn't jump in, or a few of the reasons they didn't jump in to bail McCarthy out, was one, they felt that he walked away from that debt ceiling deal that Elizabeth was talking about and went for further budget cuts beyond what was agreed to with the president. Two, they did not like the impeachment inquiry, which they referred to as partisan. And three, they didn't like being blamed, as McCarthy did over the weekend in some Sunday TV shows, for possibly bringing the government close to the brink of a government shutdown. So those three things combined really irked Democrats. And so McCarthy's relationship with Biden, when it came to Democrats not bailing him out, was a huge factor in last night's vote and his loss. Because if he just had a few Democrats go McCarthy's way, we could be having a whole different conversation today.
And just while we have you, Jay, to follow up, now the two names out there, the two individuals that have formally said they want to go for the House Speaker role, and that's Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan.
That's right. Steve Scalise just made it official moments ago. He released a letter to his colleagues announcing his intention to run for Speaker of the House. He has some support. Of course, he's the #2 Republican in the House of Representatives. He's already got the #3 Republican, Tom Emmer, the majority whip, squarely behind him. Even Matt Gaetz earlier this week said that Steve Scalise would be a good choice for Speaker. But then, of course, on the other side of that, Jim Jordan earlier today announced his intention to run for Speaker as well. And when we talk about President Biden, we have a conversation following President Biden's remarks. It's worth pointing out Jim Jordan is one of President Biden's primary antagonists here on Capitol Hill. He is one of the 3 committee chairs who are running the impeachment inquiry investigations into President Biden and also mounting the investigations into President Biden's son, Hunter. So both are picking up support in different parts of the House Republican Conference. There's potentially a third, Kevin Hern, who might jump into the race. But what we're hearing from House Republicans is they're going to try to settle this problem next week and emerge from a meeting behind closed doors next week with the Speaker candidate. The question is, can they settle some of the bad blood in their party and actually coalesce around someone to lead them?
Again, the president addressing questions just a moment ago regarding the fact that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy was voted out of his role yesterday, a historic move, a move that hasn't been made for more than 100 years. Even back then, that vote, it didn't even get to a vote. It failed. This did go through, the president answering questions about it just moments ago at the White House.
Mr. President, questions on Speaker McCarthy, if I can. Speaker McCarthy, then Speaker McCarthy, said that the two of you hadn't spoken directly in a long time. Why is that, and are you committed to engaging more regularly with the next House Speaker?
We had 2 agreements we shook hands on, and I assumed he was working with, I knew he was working with the Democrats in the House and Senate. It wasn't for me to do anything. If he wanted to talk to me, I was available. I'm available to whomever wants to talk to me. But the idea that I was going to somehow convince McCarthy to change his view was not reasonable.
So, Selena, the president making it sound like, hey, there was no secret here. We did talk a couple of times, and we discussed Ukraine funding. So, but he still didn't go any farther than that with regard to his thoughts about the speaker being voted out, the historic moment that it was, and now that the House is paralyzed, how does he go forward passing legislation or doing anything domestically or globally with regard to his agenda?
Yeah, Kira, we heard there again this president emphasizing this careful line that this White House has been trying to walk, which is trying to keep him separated from that dysfunction, from that chaos. Very careful to avoid weighing in on this speakership fight, saying this chaos, this dysfunction, that is on Congress to fix, not on the president. So here now, with all of this dysfunction, with the House pretty much at a standstill, this president is focused on doing what he can with his executive powers and trying to focus on implementing the legislation they've already passed. So just just moments ago, he was announcing that he's going to be relieving another $9 billion in student loan relief. This is for 125,000 Americans, and the White House saying that since Biden came into office, more than 3 million Americans, 3.6 million Americans, they have benefited from student loan relief. Now, however, this announcement, it is pretty incremental compared to what Biden had originally wanted, which is to relieve up to $20,000 in student loans to tens of millions of Americans. So an incremental step here, but Biden trying to tell Americans, trying to tell voters that, look, the Supreme Court, they struck down what I wanted to do, but I'm doing my best to deliver for Americans despite all of the chaos that's happening on the House. May not be able to get them to agree on anything, but look, I'm trying my best.
And Elizabeth, you've been covering just the student loan debt subject matter for quite a while now. Weigh in on what you think about what the president laid out today. And also, what about, borrowers who don't have any debt forgiveness? Are there any steps that they can take now?
Well, Kira, this is ultimately an incremental step that the president is trying to show they are doing something in this administration when it comes to debt forgiveness. And this was a big promise that the president made in his campaign, and he continues to try to promise borrowers he can deliver on. Of course, after the Supreme Court struck down that broad debt cancellation plan, giving up to $20,000 in debt cancellation for millions of borrowers, now he's saying, here's what we can do to right some of the wrongs in the system that already exists without having to change laws, without having to go through the legislative process that he acknowledges is in disarray, especially because he says of House Republicans. So now here are some of these steps. Specifically, these apply to income-driven repayment programs, public service loan forgiveness programs. So there are a significant number of borrowers who will be affected by this. But when you think about the reality that we are in right now, 28 million borrowers are going to be paying their student loan debt back for the first time this month in more than 3 years because that federal policy ended. And this means that those people are going to be on the hook for payments that they hadn't been on before. And so this is a significant difference for a lot of people when it comes to their budgets. The administration is trying to point out how that there is still, a good amount of people, you can see the number on your screen there, who are getting relief through these other programs. But in the big picture, this is a massive, the reality of the student debt kind of numbers are big for this administration. They're trying to figure out, is there a path forward through another law to give debt forgiveness? But acknowledge that, frankly, at the end of the day, that this is the budget reality for a lot of Americans as they're making these payments that are now due this month, Kira.
Elizabeth, thanks so much. Selena, Jay, appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.